There is a mystery of the 48th step. You see, most men stop at 47. They fall once, twice, 10 times. They fall 47 times, and then they quit. But what if the 48th step was the one that would open the gates? What if the door you've been banging on, the one sealed shut for decades, was destined to open at the next knock? The world doesn't tell you this, but heaven does. Delay is not denial, and failure is not final. Failure is a fire, and not all fire is meant to destroy. Some is meant to refine. The story of the man who failed 47 times is not a tale of defeat, but of divine preparation, a hidden work of the invisible hand shaping him for something far greater than he could ever foresee. Every rejection he faced was not a closed door, but a chiseling away the unnecessary, a trimming of pride, impatience, short-sightedness, or overconfidence. Failure, though bitter in the moment, became the most honest teacher, more honest than applause, more sacred than comfort. Each fall tested not just his ability, but his identity. Would he be defined by what others said, or would he remember who he was called to be? Would he see himself as a failure or as a work still in progress? The world often sees failure as a verdict, a stamp of finality. But heaven views it as a stage, a molding table where warriors are formed, not ruined. There's a story of Thomas Edison that echoes this truth. After thousands of failed attempts at creating a working light bulb, someone asked him how it felt to fail so many times. Edison replied, "I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work." That response is not just optimism, it's revelation. Each failed attempt was a necessary path toward the invention that changed the world. And so it is with anyone called to do something greater than themselves. What looks like falling is often rising in disguise. There's a strange paradox here. The longer the process, the deeper the foundation. Skyscrapers are not built on shallow ground. The taller the structure, the deeper the digging must go. And so if you've been failing repeatedly, it may be because you're being prepared to carry more than you imagined. You're not being buried. You're being planted. Now consider the lie that age somehow disqualifies us from greatness, that after a certain number of years, the story has already been written. This idea is a deception, a whispered resignation that keeps countless people from stepping into their true calling. But destiny doesn't punch a time clock. It doesn't retire at 60, 5, or fade after youth. If anything, purpose often awakens when experience and wisdom have finally caught up to vision. The man who built a billion-dollar company at 65 didn't do so despite his age. He did it because of it. At 65, he had 47 full chapters of trial, learning, falling, recovering, and discovering who he truly was and what mattered most. All that seemed wasted was now woven into something weighty and unstoppable. Think of Colonel Harlan Sanders, the founder of Kentucky Fried Chicken, who started franchising his chicken recipe in his 60s after decades of failure, job losses, and rejections. He had worked as a farmer, streetcar conductor, insurance salesman, and even operated a gas station, none of which brought lasting success. But in his mid-60s, an age when most would have retired in frustration, he drove around the country sleeping in his car, pitching his fried chicken recipe to over 1,000 restaurants before one finally said yes. That single yes birthed a global brand. Why did it happen then? Because age doesn't cancel calling. In fact, sometimes age is the very vessel through which calling matures. The myth of youth-driven success is only half the story. The other half, often hidden, is that true impact requires time. It takes seasons of sowing, of losing, of listening, and growing quiet enough to hear the deeper call. Your years are not a liability, they are leverage. When the world says you're too late, God says you're right on time. Scripture itself is filled with late bloomers. Moses didn't lead until 80. Caleb claimed his inheritance at 85. Abraham stepped into his promise at 75. Their bodies aged, but their calling never did. Their assignment was waiting on the other side of patience. And so the man who failed 47 times wasn't behind schedule. He was being aligned. Every delay was calibration. Every disappointment a redirection. And when the moment came, when he built something that touched the world, it wasn't by might or youth or speed. It was by endurance. It was the reward of not quitting when everything around him said it was over. So don't believe the lie that you've missed your window. If the vision still breathes inside you, then time is not your enemy. It's your servant. The same fire that once seemed to consume you is now the very flame that lights your path forward. You're not too old. You're not too far gone. You're not finished. You're just arriving. The 48th attempt wasn't cool. It was inevitable, but only to the one who refused to stop at 47. That's the mystery. The breakthrough didn't come because he suddenly became lucky or stumbled into fortune. It came because he had built something invisible over all those years: resilience, wisdom, and the spiritual muscle of persistence. Success often appears sudden to spectators, but to those who lived the journey, it was never a surprise. It was a seed watered daily in obscurity, finally breaking through the soil. The man who failed 47 times wasn't aimlessly trying. He was being shaped through every setback, mistake, and rejection. He didn't lose, he learned. And when he rose again, that 48th attempt bore fruit not because it was his best plan, but because he was finally his best self. We often romanticize the moment of success without honoring the weight of perseverance that built it. But every no he received had tempered him like iron forged through relentless fire. That's why when the 48th door opened, he could walk through it with authority, not as someone who was merely lucky, but as someone who had been prepared in secret. The walls of Jericho didn't fall after one march. They didn't fall after 7. It took 13 full circles over 7 days, circles that made no sense, that looked like madness to outsiders. But that's often how breakthrough works. It looks foolish, circular, even repetitive. But obedience in repetition is never wasted. The man could have stopped on his 47th lap and spent the rest of his life believing the walls were never going to fall. But he didn't. And that's what changed everything. There's a lesser-known story about Jack Ma, the founder of Alibaba, who was rejected from over 30 jobs, including KFC, before launching one of the world's most valuable e-commerce companies. He wasn't the most technical nor the most connected. What set him apart was his refusal to let rejection define him. Every no pushed him toward a deeper yes. By the time his 48th idea emerged, he was no longer just a dreamer. He was a man sharpened by adversity and capable of stewarding what he once only imagined. And herein lies another paradox of destiny: the greater the delay, the greater the glory. The man's 47 failures weren't a detour from his purpose. They were the preparation for it. You see, quick success often builds platforms that can't bear the weight of calling. But delayed success, glory that comes through fire, creates foundations that last. What if the reason the breakthrough didn't happen at 35 or 45 or even 60 was because the thing he was building wasn't meant to be common? Some victories are so weighty, they require time to be grown into. Sometimes it's not just about what you're building, but who you're becoming in the process. If he had succeeded earlier, he may have built a business. But at 65, he built a legacy. Why? Because time had clarified what mattered. The delay purified the vision, stripped it of ego, and anchored it in something deeper than profit or praise. There's a story in the life of Joseph from ancient scripture, a man who dreamed of greatness in his youth, but was betrayed by his brothers, sold into slavery, falsely accused, and forgotten in prison for over a decade. It wasn't until 13 years later that he was elevated to rule a nation, from pit to palace, but only after every ounce of pride was replaced with humility, every trace of impatience refined into maturity. Had Joseph ascended earlier, he wouldn't have been able to sustain the weight of leadership. But by the time he stood before Pharaoh, he had been emptied of himself and filled with vision. That is the kind of glory that comes after delay. It is not fragile or fleeting. It is rooted, unshakable, and marked by purpose. The man who built his empire at 65 didn't do it faster, but he did it deeper. He wasn't the flash of a comet, he was the steady rise of a mountain. And that is the kind of rise that cannot be reversed. The long road wasn't a punishment, it was a process. A sacred one. So if you find yourself in the middle of failure number 33 or rejection number 44, take heart. Not because it feels good, but because it means you're still in the process. It means the ground is still being tilled for something great. The delay you feel now may be heaven giving your roots time to deepen before your life bears the kind of fruit that lasts. Some of the most impactful works on earth were born not in the rush of early ambition, but in the slow burn of time and obedience. What makes the 48th attempt so powerful is not that it finally worked. It's that it was built on a foundation no storm could shake. The glory was not only in the outcome, but in the endurance that preceded it. The man who failed 47 times did not just succeed in business. He succeeded in faith, in resilience, in character. And when he finally arrived, the world saw a company. But heaven saw a testimony. You are not finished. That truth echoes through every story that dares to defy the world's obsession with timelines and appearances. The man who built his legacy after 47 failures didn't just build something valuable. He became someone unshakable. And the greatest secret in his journey was this: he never gave up because he never believed it was over. The world has a way of convincing people they've missed their chance, that there's a certain window for dreams, a proper time to soar, and once it's passed, you're expected to settle into silence. But the truth is far different. The deepest callings don't expire with age. The greatest works are often born in the final chapters because they are backed not by youthful ambition but by seasoned purpose. As long as breath is in your lungs, you are not done. You are not too late, too broken, too worn out, or too far behind. If you've still got a vision burning in your soul, even if it flickers faintly, it is proof that your assignment is still active. The man who succeeded, after a lifetime of losses, didn't get a second chance. He stayed faithful to his only one. He didn't chase the noise of the world. He listened for the still whisper that kept calling him forward. And when everything around him looked like it was over, that inner voice said, "Keep going." That kind of perseverance doesn't come from motivation alone. It comes from knowing that purpose is not something you retire from. It comes from believing that the author of your life doesn't write half stories. There's a powerful example in the life of Laura Ingalls Wilder, the author of the beloved Little House on the Prairie series. For most of her life, she was not a writer. She lived through poverty, hardship, the loss of a child, and the grinding reality of rural American life. It wasn't until she was in her 60s, decades after most people would have surrendered their dreams, that she began to put her memories on paper. Those stories, born out of a lifetime of endurance, struggle, and simplicity, went on to touch millions and became one of the most cherished series in American literature. What if she had believed the lie that her best years were behind her? What if she had said, "It's too late"? The world would have lost a voice that carried both innocence and depth, words that couldn't have been written in her 20s because they required the weight of years to be fully formed. That's the power of not giving up. The seed of purpose within you does not die with disappointment. It waits. It waits for the moment when you're ready not just to dream it, but to carry it. And sometimes the waiting is what gives your work the depth and authority it never would have had if it came easy. There's something else too, something sacred. The world teaches us to pursue success for the sake of success. But the man who failed 47 times discovered something greater. That legacy is not about applause, but about obedience. You are not finished because your life is not just about what you accomplish. It's about who you become, and becoming takes time. It takes falling and getting back up. It takes hearing no again and again and still having the courage to say yes to the call inside you. It takes continuing to walk towards something invisible, even when others have turned back. You're not finished because you're still becoming. And if you're still becoming, then the story is still unfolding. The man who finally succeeded didn't just build a company. He built a life that proved faithfulness outlasts failure. He stood as evidence that dreams delayed are not dreams denied. That age is not a barrier, but a badge of honor. That falling isn't final unless you refuse to rise. And most of all, that the fire in your spirit is stronger than the clock on the wall. So don't count yourself out because it hasn't happened yet. Don't stop walking because the road is longer than you thought. The walls didn't fall after one lap around Jericho. They fell after 13. Not because the ground changed, but because the people didn't quit. Your breakthrough might not be at the beginning of your story. It might be in your final chapter. But oh, what a chapter it will be. All the failures, all the tears, all the silent years will suddenly make sense. They weren't wasted. They were woven. They were forming something no one else could seed you. A version of you that is not only strong enough to receive the blessing, but wise enough to carry it well. You are not finished. You are not late. You are right on time for the thing you were created to do. And when your 48th step arrives, it will not just be success, it will be redemption. Not only for the dream, but for every step it took to get there. Keep walking. Keep trusting. The best is not behind you. The best is waiting just beyond the step you take next. So to the one who failed 47 times, to the one who thinks it's too late, to the one who almost walked away after years of nothing, don't stop. Don't bow out. Don't give up. The 48th door is not just any door. It's your door. The delay was divine. The silence was strategic. The struggle was sacred. And your story, it's not ending. It's just turning the page. The world may laugh at 47 failures, but heaven rejoices at one faithful heart who doesn't quit. Because the greatest breakthroughs are not for the fastest or the youngest, but for those who endure, who believe, who keep walking, even when every voice tells them to turn back. And when you reach your 48th step, you'll understand it was always worth it. And you were always chosen for it.